Now joining me, former assistant coach on the college level. He used to be on the New Orleans Hornets staff under the direction of Coach Byron Scott. Now he is a stud at ESPN 710 Radio. That is Coach Dave Miller. Coach Zach Gelb, PureShovio.com. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing this evening?
Zach, I'm praying you can hear me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Dave. You know, we had a little technical difficulty, but the show does go on. But, Coach, is there any truth to the rumor that you could possibly be taking your talents with Mike Breen and Jeff Van Gundy? I know Mark Jackson is no longer a part of that crew once the season concludes.
Listen, that would be a dream come true, Zach, but I'm still a rookie. I'm just learning my way in this broadcast business. And if they call me, I'd be there in a second. But I'm happy doing the Laker pre- and post-games, and I'm just as happy being on your show.
Let's start off with what happened last night. The Miami Heat were horrendous down the stretch. What went wrong with them offensively that caused them to only have 5 points in the final 7 minutes?
Well, you know, Zach, they reverted back to what they had done throughout the entire season when they weren't playing well. You saw one-on-one basketball. DWade was hot, but in basketball, in order for everything to flow, you've got to have player movement and you've got to have ball movement. And when you see four guys standing, even though you may score the basket, it really hurt their defense. They weren't able to get back. I know everyone's been talking that they've only scored 2 points in that last 6 minutes and 53 seconds, but to me it was all about the defense, because when you become stagnant, you become flat-footed, you can't defend.
Now, how does LeBron James turn this one around? Only had 8 points last night, 9 points in the fourth quarter over 4 games. The King has to step it up.
Well, I'll tell you, it really has shown what I've seen. I started watching him play back in 8th grade before he even got to high school. And what I think nobody has talked about nationally is that he's a facilitator naturally. He's not a scorer. At times, he looks very uncomfortable. Now, if you put him on a weak roster like he had in Cleveland, that's called Darwinism. You're going to have to score a lot. But the true LeBron James is one that makes people better. He's an excellent passer, but he also has to take the wrath of the media because they don't want a max guy that's a facilitator. I was a little disappointed with Derek Spoelstra because I think as a coach, he should have been able to call a timeout and maybe run some down screens. And I'm not talking about LeBron coming off for jumpers. If you look what the matchups were, the majority of the night he had Jason Terry, Jason Kidd. You go down, you set a down screen, and then you open up with 2 feet in the paint, and you go to work. I blame LeBron, but I also blame Spoelstra.
Last night, Chris Bosh replicated a Game 1 performance. He was dominant in the first half, but then came out, well, not so well in the second half. What halftime adjustments did you see Rick Carlisle make on the Miami Heat big man last night?
Well, it wasn't so much the adjustments individually. I just thought as the game went on, the defense tightened up, and they were able to throw out zone. And you see, zone bothers LeBron because, again, how do you guard LeBron? You take away all his transition layups and dunks, and you make him a jump shooter. With Bosh, I thought it was a great mix of pick and pops, pick and rolls. And again, the average fan doesn't understand that no one is going to come out and get 25 in the first half and 25 in the second half. It's a team game. That's what the luxury of having a good team or a dream team. In the Heat, you got 3 superstars. LeBron doesn't have to be spectacular every night, but he can't just stand there and be flat-footed. To me, he looked disinterested, and it almost looked like he did not want to compete. I like Bosh. Bosh has been very active. Bosh has tried to defend, and Bosh has taken offensively what the defense gives him.
We're talking to Coach Dave Miller, and Coach DWade has been phenomenal in this series so far. He looks like vintage DWade from the 2006 NBA Finals where the Miami Heat beat the Dallas Mavericks. Wade must be driving himself crazy. He's probably wondering what else does he have to do to close out these games.
Well, you know what? A competitor doesn't do that. DWade knows that this is his team, and DWade knows everyone talked about that LeBron couldn't close. But remember this, Zach, DWade struggled. There's been plenty of games in this series. If you look back in game number 2, Wade went scoreless at the end of the game. And I think that game he had 36 points. So, again, there's ebb and flow. But as a team, you never worry about what do you have to do to carry the others. You just hope that, let's just say LeBron had a bad night shooting, which he was 3 for 11. Well, then you hope as a teammate that he's going to lock down defensively. He did not. You hope that he's going to get double-digit rebounds. He did not. It's sort of like a marriage. Some days are going to be good, and some days you're going to have to do a little bit more. But at the end of the day, if you want to stay together, you've got to work together.
Now, as a coach, how special was watching Dirk Nowitzki's performance last night? He didn't have it all, but let's remember he also had 102-degree fever. But Dirk looked pretty well down the stretch last night.
Well, you know, Zach, he looks good all the time, and as a coach, I've always thought this, and I've always taught this. If you put on the uniform, there's no damn excuses whether you were sick or not. If you put on the uniform, you're obligated to the owner, to the coach, to the 11 other teammates, and to your fans to play. Now, with that being said, it wasn't a Michael Jordan-esque performance, but Dirk has impressed me the entire playoffs. The level that he plays, I'm kind of hoping that people take away that soft category. He's called soft because he's 7 foot and he shoots jump shots. He's not soft. You will never see a 7-footer with that skill set as long as we live. And what's really unfortunate is if he doesn't win a ring, and I picked Dallas to win in 7, and there's a great chance they may not win, but everybody in our era judges greatness by rings. I just judge him for what I see. And I'll tell you this, I'd love to coach Dirk Nowitzki.
Why wasn't Dirk in on the final play last night?
Don't know. You know, that's coaching. You just don't know.
And also, Jason Terry and Stevenson, they have done some smack talking in this series multiple times. They said today LeBron checked out of Game 4. Terry had 17. Stevenson had 11. If these two guys continue to play the way they are doing in Game 4, I would imagine a coach wouldn't have any problem with that.
No, and the one thing you got to understand, the media talks about bulletin board material. I've coached on these sidelines for over 20 years. If I have to worry about what another player says about one of my players to get them excited, well, first of all, those type of guys aren't playing. They're already in vacation at Atlantis or Cabo. So I think it's great for the media to talk about it, but there's not a player that gets upset. You play the game in between the lines. Talk is cheap. Jason Terry needed to have a good game, not because he talked some smack, because he's been the second leading scorer for the Dallas Mavericks all year. And quite frankly, he has been playing well. Thank goodness they have Sean Marion. J.J. Barea, he's got to step up. I really give credit to Carlisle for not going with Peja and throwing in. I mean, who would have thought that Brian Cardinal is going to be in the NBA Finals? And it all worked out. But that goes with ebb and flow of coaching. There is no scheme to it. You coach by your gut feel. And it showed me that Rick Carlisle has a lot of trust all the way down to his last man.
We're talking to former New Orleans Hornets assistant coach Dave Miller. And, Coach, you had Tyson Chandler when you were in New Orleans. He had 13 points, 16 rebounds last night. Did you get a chance to talk to the big man?
No, but I texted him and got a text back. I was just happy for his success. And the one thing people need to know about Tyson, we always say he's offensively challenged, but he's got the heart as big as the Pacific Ocean. And knowing that Dirk was not feeling good, did not participate in the shoot-around, it was a night that Tyson had to pick up on rebounds. I don't have a stat sheet here, but if I'm right, I remember at one point, and he may have finished Dirk with only 1 rebound. I mean, J.J. Barea had more rebounds than Dirk. So for Tyson to be able to accept his role, they don't run plays for him. He's in there we call a rim runner. And Chris Paul elected his career when we traded for him. If he can run and get you some easy baskets, he can get you some offensive putbacks, that's all icing on the cake. And he doesn't have to necessarily shots, but he needs to alter shots. I thought he was the X factor last night, Zach.
And, Coach, what's your reaction to how the refs has done? I think they've been all right. They haven't been great. They haven't been terrible. But if you ask LeBron James and Dirk Nowitzki by judging their facial expressions, it looks like these refs are the worst refs in the world. Doesn't it amaze you how these guys complain after every single call?
Yeah, well, that's why they got this new respect the game rule that started out that I thought was just ultimately ridiculous. And as much as I don't like referees, you set a tone, just like you do defensively. You wall off the paint and you say, there'll be no layups. Well, the same thing as an official. And as much as I don't like them, I don't want players yapping at them and being in their ear. And, I mean, you and I see it on the replays, and some people see it firsthand with the eye test. A guy will just clobber somebody and all of a sudden look or say it wasn't a foul. I zap them with the quick piece because remember, the one thing as an NBA player, in order to make money and sign big contracts, you got to have minutes on the floor. So the refereeing hasn't been bad, and you know what? Even if it has been bad, it's been consistently bad, which I've always said, as long as you're consistently good or you're consistently bad, so be it. But you know what? they got to referee the fastest, quickest game in the world. I think they're doing a good job.
I'm going to put you in the role of Eric Spoelstra. What would be your message to your team? What's your pep talk to the Miami Heat as they get ready for Game 5?
Well, it certainly wouldn't be to grind it out in hand-to-hand combat. I've been really disappointed in hearing all that. I mean, that stuff my wife can say just by osmosis of being married to a coach. You know, if I hear one more grind it out and primal warfare, you know, when you get mic'd, I want to hear like we're talking right now. I want to hear meat and potatoes, X's and O's. You know, it's really simple with Miami. You want to, Miami, let me put it to you this way. Miami's offense starts with stops. And what I mean by that is, if Miami can get out and defend, and they're very good, and they've got great on-the-ball defenders, if they can cause turnovers, there's not a team better in the league. Fast breaks are fueled by the Mavericks' turnovers. So, number one, you want to get to the floor. Number, to the rim, get up and down the floor. Number two, you've got to get more aggressive and quit settling for jumpers. And when you see that zone, you've got to probe the seams. You've got to get the ball from side to side. You've got to fake a pass to make a pass, but you certainly can't settle for jump shots. You've got to attack to the rim. If you're stopped, kick it out with it for a nice jump shot. But those are really the adjustments that I see. You've got to get easy scores against this Dallas team. You've got to beat that zone down the floor. And then you've got to get to the free throw line. Because remember, going into the playoffs, DWade and LeBron James, respectively, got to the free throw line the second and third most in the NBA.
We're talking to 710 ESPN AM personality as well as former assistant coach Dave Miller. And Coach, Mark Jackson gets the job with the Golden State Warriors. What's your expectations for Mark Jackson?
Well, on defense, there's not going to be any hands down because you know what Mark says: hands down, man down. And then I think when he walks into the arena, all the security guards are going to say, Mama, there goes that man. I'm really happy for him. Here's a guy that played 17 years in the league. He was a point guard, a student of the game. He's played for some great head coaches in the NBA. He played for a great coach in Lou Carnesecca. I'm very, very happy for him. He's going to have his work cut out for him. It's not a roster that you really can teach. Well, no, I should say that you can expect him to play defense. He's going to have to teach. They're going to have to shrink the court. He's going to have to preach it. But he needs some help on that roster to be successful. But if there's a guy that knows the game, they've got a good choice in Mark Jackson.
Now, you bounced around from place to place, and as you mentioned, you are on the pre- and post-game show for the LA Lakers. Brian Shaw is out of a job, and you have Mike Brown taking over. What would your advice be to Shaw if you could sit down with him one-on-one?
Well, he's just got to keep his head up. I mean, this is a hard business. There's 30 head coaches in this league, and then when you look at the 30 teams, let's just round it off and say there's 5 coaches, 3 assistants, 3 on the front of the bench, 2 on the back. So you've got 150 guys. Shaw is going to be a head coach, but I emphasize, I simplify. I have sympathy for him, I guess what I'm saying, because it's that old adage: you can't become a head coach because you don't have any experience. Well, it was the same way with me on the radio. I had no experience. And last week I landed in Bristol and they put me on Sports Center Live. I had no experience in the studio. They put me on Mike and Mike. So somebody thought I was good enough to take a chance. All Brian Shaw needs is for somebody to take a chance. What went down in L.A. was quite simply this. The Bush family wanted to put an end to the Phil Jackson era. And Phil Jackson did wonderful things for this city and this franchise. But they did not want to have the triangle continue. They did not want to have an extension of Phil Jackson coach this team. And Jim Buss, in my opinion, decided to go in a different direction. And that hurt Brian Shaw because he's very capable and will be a head coach in this league down the road.
We're talking to Coach Miller. And, Coach, as I mentioned, you did have some assistant work with the New Orleans Hornets, and Chris Paul's a free agent not this year but next year, as well as Dwight Howard. Do you think there's any chance that Dwight and Chris Paul stay where they are?
No, I don't think so. Well, Chris Paul, I don't think so for sure because I don't think they can get enough players. I think Chris Paul ends up in New York. And then with Dwight Howard, he's not going to come to L.A. because Jim Buss, the only way he could get Dwight Howard is to trade center for center. They can't get him with all the cap and all the money stuff. And who else knows what's coming with this new CBA. But, with Dwight Howard, I kind of wish he had the attitude that I want to be the man. Right now, we're seeing the big 3 in Miami. We possibly could see Chris Paul end up with Carmelo and Amari. I think that that's an okay thing, but I'm old school. I want to be the top dog. It's like I told Mike and Mike. I love being in the studio with you three. We're the big three. But my goal is to have my own radio show on ESPN. I want people to come on my show as a guest and not come on their show as a guest, if that makes sense. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think Dwight leaves because he can sort of force the trade and say, listen, you got to trade me or you're going to lose me. With Chris Paul, they don't have enough ammunition. He needs shooters and he needs bigs around him because, trust me on this one, wherever Chris Paul goes, they're going to win.
Do you think it's good or bad for the league when you have star players collaborating and coming together, like with what happened with Miami, what happened with the Celtics a few years ago?
Well, I don't think it's good for the league necessarily because then the cellar dwellers never have a chance. But I've said this, if you're a lawyer out of law school and you go to a small firm and you do your due diligence, you win your cases, you're great in the courtroom, you should have the opportunity to be able to move to a bigger law firm in New York City or Los Angeles. I think that if you work hard, this is the land of the free and the home of the brave and democracy. So why should someone tell me that I can't go to a bigger law firm or a better team if it's going to be to take care of my family? So for the league, not so much. For individuals, I think it's, you know, it's the American way.
We're talking to Coach Miller. And, Coach, one last question right before we let you go. Shaquille O'Neal retired last week, and people are trying to wonder where he's ranked among the all-time greats. Where do you think he ranks, and what will you miss most about Shaq?
Well, what I miss most about Shaq, Zach, is we were next-door neighbors. When he came to the Lakers, I went to the USC back in 1995, and we lived on the same street. So since he's left the Lakers, I've missed him driving his moped up and down John Street. It was the craziest thing I had ever seen. And I guess I'm luckier than most. I recruited Shaquille O'Neal when he was a ninth grader at Cole High School in San Antonio, Texas. I was an assistant at the University of Texas. He ended up going to LSU. He called me to tell me his decision. And I tell my kids and my campers this all the time. You've got to take the high road and be a bigger man. Back then, I could have cursed him out and told him he was making the wrong choice to go to LSU with Dale Brown. And I said, big fella, we're going to see each other down the road. Good luck to you, and I love recruiting you. Little did I know that we would be living on the same street in Manhattan Beach at the time. So there's a lesson to be learned. How I rank him, I always say this. There's a Mount Rushmore of centers in the NBA. Number one is Bill Russell. He's the granddaddy of them all. Number two, I go with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the captain. Number three, I'm from Allentown, Pennsylvania originally, so you know I love Wilt Chamberlain. And then I put Shaq at number four. But with that being said, of all the centers I named above him, they were all long and lean. Shaquille O'Neal was the first center to do what he was able to do with the footwork. And I know a lot of times he was out of shape, but when you cut through that and you really look at his lateral movement, his up and down the court, we will never see another, just like I said, you'll never see another 7-footer like Dirk with that skill set. You will never see another big with that height and that size and that athletic in Shaquille O'Neal. When I look at his whole body of work, the word that comes to my mind, he was spectacular. He was a showman. He was a player. He won championships. He made movies, Kazam, and all that other stuff, reality TV shows. There will never be anyone like him, and he will be missed on the court. But he's probably going to take my job, so I wish he was still playing because he's going to be great on the air and on TV. Tell
me a little bit more about your basketball camp that you do.
Well, I run camps out here in Manhattan Beach. You can go to my website, and then it's one word, MVPcamp.com. And I keep the fun and fundamentals. And if any of your listeners out there want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Coach Dave Miller. And Zach, I've got to go because I've got a big 7-footer staring at me here on my cell phone saying, Coach, let's go. We got to get some work in.
Thank you so much, Coach. Appreciate the time. We'll definitely tell Mike Breen that you should be on the staff next year. Let's do it again real soon.
Well, listen, if you can get me a job, you got 10%, you'd be my agent.
You know what? Let's do it right now. You can end the broadcasting career. Thanks so much, Coach.
Okay, guys, have a wonderful night, and thanks for having me on.
You too. Coach Dave Miller right there on Shovio.com.